Good evening, everybody. Sorry we're behind. Would you please rise as I introduce the person leading our flag salute tonight, and then afterwards will you join me in prayer? Tonight, leading us in the flag salute is Curtis Everett. He served in Japan, Korea, and the Cuban crisis. He was also on the ground crew in West Palm Beach for the Kennedy administration, and he actually flew one time on Air Force One. And today is his birthday. And he is my uncle. So, Uncle Curtis, will you please lead us in the flag salute? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated, or hold on. Let's pray first. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the positions you've placed us in leadership, and I thank you by faith for giving us wisdom and guidance to lead our city and our citizens into our greatest days thus far. I thank you, Father God, for all that you have done, all that you are doing, and all that you have promised to do. We thank you and we give you all the glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Item 1 tonight is the consent docket A through F. Do I have a motion for approval or any questions or discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions, please.
Yes, sir.
On page 17 of 80 is the minutes for the special call meeting on September 10th, 2018. Members present list myself. Well, as you read downstream where there a vote taken, my name doesn't show up. And I'd like my name to be added as a affirmative. And we also find the exact same thing on page 19 of 80. I'm present, but I'm not voting. Apparently, I dozed off at that point. I appreciate that. The next question I had was, and maybe I guess I dozed off on this one too. I need some help on item 19-31103, the Samaritan EMS thing. We're paying $19,989.75. Help me to understand. Is that just a fixed fee, or is that predicated on so many runs, or is it a fixed fee plus so much per run? How's that fee assessed?
17,000.
Did I say 17?
Berkeley, do you have that answer?
I do not know. It's a fixed fee. I would have to people with research, but I'd be more than happy to report that.
Yeah, I don't know either, so I'm just
And I
wondering how
believe
that...
Sham, the fire station, fire department would probably have that answer as well, but he is not here, so
That's all I had, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
thank you. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is consideration and possible action to accept CIP 13-01 sanitary sewer rehab, West Interceptor and McMillan LS Force Main improvements. Approve final change order, authorize final payment in the amount of $341,584.27, and place maintenance bonds into effect. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes. Item 3 is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 1513, declaring the intent to consider approval of a project plan and creation of a tax increment district or districts under the Local Development Act, directing preparation of a project plan, appointing a revenue review committee, directing the review committee to make findings as to eligibility and financial impact, if any, on taxing jurisdictions within the district or districts, and directing the review committee to make a recommendation with respect to the proposed project. Do I have a motion or any questions?
Who appoints the committees?
Page 2, number 3, a review, well, actually, number 2, a review committee is hereby appointed, and it lists the membership consisting. And then number 3, the mayor is directed to request of each the following entities designate a representative, and there are 6 areas for that, so all of the specifications are there for the appointees.
Do we have a staff report with the intent of this, with a little more specifics?
Well, this is after a meeting that we had with the Center for Economic Law, and the mayor was there, as well as I, and also the Economic Development Director. And we looked at this and reviewed all of it. What we're trying to do is show that we've got movement forward on creation of a TIF district along the 23rd Street corridor. And this is just the beginning of that so that we can start that work with this group.
Essentially, what they're doing is they're going down 23rd Street, finding locations that qualify and doing the legwork to pre-deem TIFs properties or TIF districts so that we are further down the road when it comes time to trying to approve something for a TIF once you have a developer in place and, you know, somebody ready to do something to revitalize the area.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd just like to clarify for Mr. Todd or anyone else's concern about the members of the committee. Those are specifically designated by state law, so who those members might be, except for they're members of the public that will be included as well. So.
And also Beth Ann, who's serving as a municipal attorney for us at the moment, has reviewed this resolution and worked with the law firm to get it ready for us tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve resolution number 1513.
I still have a question. Last time we approved a TIF, if I may, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we approved a TIF, we had a specific, actually, even the last time we did this, the consideration of approval, the intent, we had a very specific piece of ground and a very a vague description of the project on a very specific piece of ground, and that's what we move forward on, the intent. So this intent is just the entire street of 23rd?
No, the economic law, essentially, the bachelor group, it will go down 23rd Street, which is what we've already approved them to do before, and they will designate certain properties or sections of properties that qualify to be a TIF, and then essentially this helps get the ball rolling so that they can get all the legwork done, and then somebody comes along. It speeds up the process of getting properties redeveloped.
So wouldn't we approve an intent on those individual properties?
This is just the first step, and there are some designated properties already that would be included in the TIF. That is, I believe the state has already designated some areas, and so we would benefit from that designation for this resolution.
Is there anyone here tonight from the Law Center?
I do not believe so, but would you like to explain something?
And Childs, oh, thank you. And I actually have worked with this group in the past to do a TIF. This really is the first step in the process. And, you know, of course, the project plan, which is the formal area where you determine, okay, where are you going to capture the increment? Where's the area that you're actually going to look at? That will be determined by the committee as it advances, of course, with the input of the city council. Like they said, this is only the first step in the process. Now, there is one action that the council will have to take. The council will have to appoint one representative, and typically that individual will serve as the chairman. But the other taxing entities, they will be responsible for identifying their own representative. And this is clearly in line with the state statute. And like the city manager said and the mayor said, it's a first step in a very, very long process. I'll be happy to answer any other questions if I can. What I can tell you, though, is I did have them rework this just a little bit because different municipalities handle it different ways with regard to final appointment. Like, for example, some municipalities, what they will do is the governing body wants to be more hands-on, and they'll actually approve the appointments after they're made by the other taxing entities. But in this particular case, we felt like, working in cooperation, that this was a very good fit for the city of Bethany. So I apologize. Council member?
Yes, this is where the attorneys put the specifics together to do this particular 23rd Street project.
Well, typically, I can only address from my experience of working with this group, and this is pretty much everything that they do. They do some urban redevelopment, some things like that. As you know, they've been very, very active in the Oklahoma City area. But usually what they will do is they'll meet with the mayor and meet with the city manager and probably also meet with some of the council members and get general direction about which way you want to go. And they'll begin the process of putting the project plan together.
In your experience, then, will we pass another resolution with the intent to move forward with more specific pieces of property before it goes forward?
That's really going to be more of an operational issue, but yes, I mean, certainly the council is going to be actively involved in providing direction through the city manager, and also, you know, the council has a representative on there in terms of the chairman. So, you know, perhaps you could have just a general discussion item at some point in the future as the concept advances that would give all the council members the opportunity to provide feedback. So, yes, certainly. I mean, this is just the very beginnings of the process.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it just seems preemptive to put together a possible TIF district and go to taxing jurisdictions for them to make appointments when we don't know what area we're talking about. So is it a square block or is it a linear street? And that would certainly make a different decision for me if I was representing a taxing district that's going to lose revenues over a period of time.
One of the things that I can tell you, again, and this is just based upon my experience, but you know, for example, one of the entities that I represented in the past, they did a flight safety and a downtown redevelopment TIF. And there was a pretty significant period of time that elapsed between the time that it was formulated and it was finalized. I mean, there was a lot of consideration and discussion that actually went into that. Like, for example, you talk about capturing the increment from the taxing jurisdictions. I mean, those lines were drawn and redrawn and reconsidered a number of times. And, of course, you always want to keep the increment district as small as possible. Because, you know, for the reasons that you just articulated. But, you know, it is a process, so I don't know if you found that helpful.
The way it was explained to me is, look, imagine a section of 23rd and Council, and they formulate this TIF in this area, and it would really encourage somebody to come along and say, okay, so that's a TIF. Well, now it makes sense that I would want to invest my dollars there and do whatever. And then you start getting specific at that point, but it establishes these areas, so it encourages the redevelopment or the revitalization, and so that's how it was explained to me. So, which makes perfect sense in my head, and I'm all for it.
I can totally understand establishing that intersection or the DeVille Center or whatever as a TIF district. But to declare it to be 23rd, that tells me that it could also include, Pop's motorcycle shop. I mean, that's a
I think
pretty
it would be
long
very
district.
I don't think it would be that broad.
It
I think
would
they would
have
have to
to
get
be
very,
specified.
yeah, very definite.
So are we creating this before we know what it's going to cover? And how important is it to create it now? Or should we wait?
Could I clarify, and part of this will be a question for you, Beth Ann. I was in that meeting as well, and the way it was, I saw they had a map of potentially up to 5 areas along 23rd Street. So let's say that we do proceed and approve this, it becomes a TIF district. As developers become interested, that project will come forward, and then we'll get details. But if we can start this now, we don't have to wait and interest developers to come and present a project and then start it. It just speeds up that process, like the mayor said. Now, is that accurate?
It is, and if you actually look at the verbiage of the resolution itself, I think that that's pretty important, because it does say, the city council of the city of Bethany intends to consider approval of a project plan. That's just that, you're starting the process in order to consider it. I mean, it's not really approving a TIF district. I mean, that's not done until you've had, umpteen public hearings and the proper notifications have been published and things like that. I mean, it truly is just beginning the process. The other thing that I can tell you, and this is really more of a political point than it is a legal point, and that is, I think the sooner you get the taxing jurisdictions involved, I think that they can start thinking about their role in this, because it really is a partnership. So, sometimes you'll have taxing jurisdictions that come back and say, well, you never consulted us and you never did that. And so, this is a really great opportunity to partner with these other jurisdictions. So,
If I may. So I'm a huge fan of TIF, and I think 23rd Street needs it. I'm afraid with the intent to consider approval of the project, I don't mind saying that on 23rd Street, and maybe this is, maybe it's not, on 23rd Street, we're very flexible and we are open and willing to TIF districts, to accept these TIF districts. But if there's 5 different areas, if one of those areas is one we don't desire, did we just pre-approve? Did we give, not pre-approval of the district, but pre-approval of the intent to approve their project? Or will that individual project still come back to us?
The language right here says, as the Bethany 23rd Street Community Reinvestment and Economic Development Project Plan, and it will consist of 1 or more tax increment districts. And so it does not specify which particular areas, but in the initial meeting that we had, we did look at the area and determined that there were some that were already designated as that we could go into already, and then we had some other areas of interest. But that's really all that we designated those as, was areas of interest.
So my wish would be that those X areas, that we can have the intent to look at all of 23rd and let developers know this is a possibility, but then we still give individual intent on each project before committees are formed, before the project is moved forward. So
And 23rd Street as a whole could not be one TIF district. DeVille might be one, Western Oaks Tower might be one, et cetera.
Because we don't know if we're giving intent to one project, 5 projects, and all 5, there may be 10 perfect good projects, but I have a hard time with giving intent to projects I don't know what they are.
No, they're not pre-approved. Each project will be approved on its own. So that's
After
where,
a committee gives us their findings, or just the intent of it?
after, when we see a project developer plan, that's when the approval happens. But if we wait, it might be 18 months before they can even do that.
This starts the process.
Well,
They get their legwork going. They start finding these areas and deeming, designating these areas that can be TIFs. Now developers know they've already got a lot of the paperwork done, and then developers show up and say, well, I'm interested in this, and then they've got to go through the process of approval, just like the other TIF did, but they've already gotten a lot of the legwork done, so it speeds that up. But we still, the committee has the final approval.
Correct, and I fully understand that. So Steve Allen, on our TIF District 1, pitched us as an idea, a concept, and we gave the intent to that project. Then the committee was formed, and it moved forward.
Right.
Will we have the opportunity to give intent, not final approval, but to give intent to each individual project on 23rd Street again?
Yes.
If
As I believe, as it was explained to me, that would be the case.
If I recall this correctly, and Beth Ann, please correct me if I am wrong, I think there were 3 ways that a TIF project could happen. One was the developer brought you something and did a lot of their legwork on their own. One was this way, and this is why we hired this firm to do this, so we could be advanced and make this happen a lot quicker. Then the other is, I think, can be designated as a state, something with the state, and part of that zone on 23rd has been designated by the state already.
As a state enterprise, is it as an enterprise zone?
Yes.
Okay, so.
So, and is that correct? There
What
were
does that mean?
basically 3 ways?
You know, what I can tell you is, they're the experts in this field. I mean, they do TIFs all over the state of Oklahoma. They're incredibly well-respected. And, you know, if you look at the Moshe Hall litigation and the MAPS project, I mean, they were all intimately involved in this. But, you know, to answer your question specifically, if you ever wanted to go back and refine the intent, I mean, you can always, you know, adopt another resolution. But, I mean, the intent of this particular document is just to begin the process and begin the conversation. And the council, I believe, based upon my conversations with the mayor and the city manager, will have many opportunities to provide feedback with regard to this particular issue.
And I think it's very positive then, in light of what you're explaining, that we say, yes, we are willing to do a TIF if the right project comes to us. And that's better than going back to the beginning and saying, what's a TIF? I mean, we're already saying, yes, we'll go that direction if you bring us something worthy of it. And if that's what this means, I'll make a motion to adopt it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 4 is approve the fiscal year 2019 jail service agreement with Oklahoma County and authorize the mayor to sign the documents on behalf of the city of Bethany. Do I have a motion or question?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 5 is consideration and possible action regarding actuary study of pension plan improvements to increase the retirement funding by 1.44% and reduce the vesting period from 10 years to 7 years. And I would like to say that this is on the agenda again. We're on the agenda because, not again, but on the agenda because we love our employees and we know that they're the greatest employees in the world. But in looking at this personally, I'm a bit confused because I feel like I've been given a couple different numbers and they kind of range in what this would cost the city annually. And so I personally would like to table this and have a review committee or task force look into our options and what's best for our city employees. I think there possibly, because of a conversation I had with Councilman Herron, there are options out there, but I don't think it's wise on our part to be casting a vote right now on this without some research and form a task committee to do some research and present back to council what they've found possibly being better options for our employees. And off our conversation today, do you care to share any of that?
I think there is definitely some options out there to where we can look at hybriding or converting over to a 401k style. Right now, it's approximately 15% of their pay. Us, the city, paying 11 point something, and the employee picking up the other. But into a 401k style, running the numbers in compound calculator in retirement, which is what the rest of us do, I think it will be far greater for the employee year after year after year, and for their retirement and for their future. And I would like to see us at least explore that option and figuring out if there's a way to start shifting newer employees over, new hires, to a 401k style, possibly giving them an option of pension or the 401k. And when you're in the 401k, you're vested immediately. When you get that money out of your paycheck, it's yours. And running the numbers for the average employee, a 401k style will benefit the employee 9 times out of 10 over the pension system, and it gets us off of our liability. The pension system does go on our liability, and I will say I don't fully understand this, but from the audit reports, the city of Bethany's liability as of June 30th, 2017, that was our last audit, and I will say I don't fully understand this, but our reported liability is $5,701,000 for the proportionate share of the net pension liability. I don't know if the state can ever come back on us for that. I'm not very clear on any of that system, but it is in our liability and in our yearly audit that it is a liability against us, because the pension fund is not fully funded. Although this particular pension fund is doing better than some of the other ones, in the future it could be a problem. So I would like to see us at least explore the options to shifting to another style.
I agree with you, John, but I don't think one has to be, exclusive from the other. Is there anyone here tonight to talk about this? Anyone from the actuarial firm or anything else? Okay. We talked earlier about whether the city should fund the entire portion or perhaps share it with the employees. It would be an increase of 1.44% if the city did it totally and there was no cost to the employee. I am thinking that as an employee, I would be willing to kick in my 72.72% and maybe share the cost in order to retire or be able to retire 3 years earlier. I agree totally with what you're saying, John, but that's going to take a while.
It will.
And I'm wondering if maybe we can just do this now, and it would be a morale booster for me because I never lasted anywhere 10 years. Well, I did once, but 10 years is a long time. And so I think it would be good to give the employees this opportunity. And I would move to increase the retirement funding by 1.44%, but to split that with the employees. So it would be a 50-50 cost share.
I feel like like I said before, more research needs to be done, because this is a cost to the city that will go on for infinity. And I don't think we should take that lightly. I think we need to research this and see what the best options are. And, I just feel like that's part of that is our responsibility, to look for what's in the best interest of the city as a whole. And that this could get very expensive, I believe. And I just don't think this is not something I personally am comfortable voting on tonight. I would prefer to table this, put a group together to research this and see really what makes the most sense, and then allow us to look into that and then vote on that.
So the total cost, if we funded it totally from the city, was to be between $15,000 and $16,000 a year.
Yes, 16,606.50. I handed out a
Okay.
page that Berkeley had prepared.
So $16,000 per year from the city. If the city funded it, so, you know.
I was told that that
8,000
figure could
otherwise.
actually be $150,000 a year. And so when I say that I'm hearing multiple numbers
That's a
that
pretty big
range,
multiple. Yeah.
do what, then that's kind of, I want to have clarity on that. So
Berkeley,
Berkeley,
didn't
could
you-
you answer any of these questions? I'm interested because I'm sorry, I wasn't the greatest at math. I'm the first to admit that. But when somebody says 1.44%, I really don't care about that. I want to know how much is this going to cost me in dollars every year?
On the actuary that the pension submitted, it was approximately $133,000. And they were using the best numbers they had available, which was the fiscal year FY17. And so using their 1.44%, I simply was able to pull from payroll the pensionable wages for OMRF. And so I used the more recent wage base and applied that, and it came up to like $149,000. So the $16,000 is actually the difference between using the FY17 wage base and the FY18 wage base. And the actuary used what they had available at the time, which was the FY17.
Which leads me to think that maybe we should explore why we gave that much more money to employees in 1 year. We're going from 1.44% equaling $16,000 in 2017 to equaling $133,000 in 2018?
Well, let me explain.
I hope.
Using the wage base of FY17, which that's what OMRF used, it was approximately $133,000 cost for this pension change. And simply to provide a more recent number, I used the FY18 wage base, but applied that same percentage. And so because the wage base has grown, because of staffing and just various other things, and pensionable employees, that number increased to the 149. So that's where the $15,000 to $16,000 difference is. It's simply the change of using FY17 as a wage base to calculate this, or FY18 wage base.
So this simple change, if we paid the 1.44%, would cost the city $149,668 every year.
Rather than?
Yes.
Rather than the 133, which you're saying the difference that you're showing here, the increase is $16,606.50. If we add the 1.44%, it's only going to be a difference of about $16,000 from what we've been paying. That's what your page shows.
That would be an incorrect statement.
That's
What-
the difference from what the OMRF gave us.
Right. OMRF gave us a number of $133,000, but that was, their calculation was based on FY17.
So just ignore that 133. What it's truly going to cost us is the 149 every year,
Based on FY18
based on
wages.
today's markets.
Based on
Correct.
FY18 wage base, pensionable wage base, that would be correct.
But
And I-
again, tell me what this number is, this 16,000, this is your work that you just emailed me earlier today. So
It is.
this year, yeah, I'm trying to understand it, 2017 wage-based projection is $133,062. The 2018 wage-based projection, you're saying is $149,668.50. The difference between those two numbers is $16,606.50.
The difference between those two numbers is what you said.
Okay,
But
and
but it's what it applies to that makes the difference.
So this is approximately $1,000 an employee. That's what it costs every year,
That
essentially.
would be, yeah,
roughly.
That would be a fair assessment, yes.
So again, I come back to my original
This is-
thought is that we need more information, education, and more review of this thing before we should be voting on this tonight, in my opinion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table this, but I would like some input on this. You said to get a committee to study this thing. Some input from you or whoever's going to form this committee or chair said committee to take a look at this.
I have an idea of a few people, and I would not be one of them because I'm not a mathematician.
But my motion stands to table this till we can get a better clear. I've
Second.
got many numbers floating around in my head right now that I'm not sure what's what.
Well, I'd like to apologize because I thought Berkeley and I had worked this out, but apparently I'm not very good at math either.
I had a motion, I had a second. Please cast your votes.
I would like to make a statement here that we have this $149,668 is for fiscal year 2018, which we have been out of 3 months tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but about a week from now. So we know we're going to get some increase in the wages that we have, which will make this more exasperating. And we have to take a study at it. This is a run, as far as I'm concerned, on the city treasury.
And
Please cast your
also,
vote.
We have to do
We did,
a
didn't we?
comprehensive study of what this is going to cost.
I agree. Are you ready to cast your vote? Please cast your votes.
I'd like to add to that, I think before we would look at having a cost of, say, $500 or whatever for an employee, that the employees also have some input into it. They may not
Fully agree.
want that.
Item 6 is consideration and possible approval of Board of Adjustment appointments.
I think there's a mistake there. Ward 4, Nick Pittman, is that for the Board of Adjustments? I think Ward 3 is probably for PNC.
Correct.
I know I made a recommendation for Mr. Nick Pittman on the Board of Adjustment. And
But there wouldn't
these
be-
two people are listed on the Board of Adjustment, and I have contacted one of them, and they're on the Planning and Zoning Board.
That
Now-
was a mistake, likely on my part, on not being clear with that motion, that they were intended for planning and zoning. So I'm not sure the proper way to go about that, if we should remove them and have them back on again, or if we can remove them and we'll have them back on for next week then.
Yes, please.
Beth Ann Childs,
Mrs.
you may take action on the Board of Adjustment member, but you may not take action on the other two planning and zoning members because that was not properly identified on the agenda. And I don't think you can write that off as a typographical error. So that would be my suggestion.
Mr. Mayor, in light of what she just said, would we be able to add our person that would be on Board of Adjustment that's not listed on here?
No.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to make a statement too, that the two people that were on there that should have been put on the Board of Adjustment are on the Board of Adjustment, are active on the Board of Adjustment by state law. Nobody has removed them, and they stay on the board until the time that they are removed from the board by action. Am I not correct, Mrs.?
The answer is I don't know. I would need to look at the state statute and see because, you're right. I mean, sometimes there are boards like planning or like elected officials, for example. Elected officials, if you hold over, for example, depending on the provisions of your charter, then it would be true that they would continue to maintain the position until a proper person was elected. But I don't know. I'd have to look at the statute and see. But for this.
I have done a little research, and this is correct, that they're on there until they are removed.
Okay, but for purposes of tonight's agenda,
Yes,
in
for-
compliance with the Open Meeting Act, my suggestion would be that you go ahead and make the one appointment.
Well, then I've got some more statements to make. We're not operating the planning and zoning because they're telling me that we do not have a quorum on the planning and zoning, that we have a less than a 5 number. I have not have had anybody that's been removed from the planning and zoning so they could continue having planning and zoning meetings, because I have been catching flack from people that want building permits, and they're waiting because they say we don't have a quorum to planning and zoning.
Yes, sir. When I got to City Hall today, that was something that I met with staff about. They forwarded me a couple of emails, and we're looking into that issue.
Could you resolve that, pass that on to the city manager, and have her pass it on to me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
And to all of us.
So, item 6, do I have a motion to approve Ward 4 Nick Pittman to the Board of Adjustment?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
You got a second?
Cast your votes. Item 7 is consideration and possible approval of new proposals for granting additional lease space at the 50th Street location and extending term of lease. Do I have a motion or any question or discussion?
We do
don't
have someone
any
here tonight.
information on this.
Yeah, we do have someone here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for having us here to address any concerns or questions you may have. My name is Lance Jones. I'm with Crown Castle. We just want to take a couple minutes and address this. We want to talk about, who Crown Castle is, so that you know who it is that's operating this telecommunications site. Talk about why is there a need for this expansion in general, and then specifically why at this particular location, and then finally to provide a couple of points of contact as if the board approves that you would be able to communicate with as the project moves forward. So, who is Crown Castle? We've been around since 1994, first established in Houston, Texas. We currently have our corporate headquarters in Houston. We have an operational headquarters in Cannonsburg, which is outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have about 100 offices across 46 states with more than 5,000 team members, continuing to grow. Crown Castle is built on the premise of shared wireless infrastructure. That just means we build towers or we lay fiber so that instead of having multiple towers, you have multiple people on one tower. It means less towers in a community. So one of the things we want to look at is how those things work together. So as you look here, you've got a couple of different pictures. You're talking about antennas on top of power poles, on top of light poles, and then a tower there in the background. So today, when you look at, looking back just a couple of years ago, how many people had a phone in their home that was their primary means of communication? Today, we're moving to most people do not have that. Cell phones are their primary means of communication. And you'll notice that from a safety perspective, 80% of 911 phone calls are made by wireless calls. Look, today's world, people experience life differently. They're at the track. At this 50th Street location, you've got your field and track. People are videotaping their kids. They're taking pictures. They're sharing that. It's via these wireless database, the wireless broadband, that they're able to do this. So Crown Castle, as a wireless infrastructure, and the way to think about this is when you think about infrastructure, a lot of times, historically, you think about roadways, bridges, et cetera, right? It's a means of how to get from point A to B. Well, towers are that highway. And then you'll have carriers like Sprint, Verizon, AT&T. They provide the cars, the network that gets across. So Crown Castle has more than 40,000 owned or managed towers. We have 60,000 route miles of fiber and 50,000 small cell networks. So when you get into small, very dense areas where towers just don't make sense, you'll have these small cell networks. Those small cell networks then tie back to the towers. So why, in general, why do we need these increases? Well, if you watch the news, listen to radio, you hear about 5G, how it's coming. 5G is going to make things like, Apple Watch. When you're talking about data, these tools are going to be dependent upon 5G. So your carriers, what they're doing now is laying the framework, the foundation to make 5G possible once those get worked out. You can see that, you're hearing about autonomous cars. You see the young lady to the right there, virtual reality. There's augmented reality. These are learning tools going to be moving into schools. Just very briefly, I saw a video a little while ago. Lockheed Martin put a school bus together, and they had special windows inserted into this bus, and they put kids on the bus, and they started to drive away from the school. And as they did, the windows changed to begin to look like the landscape of Mars. So as they're driving along, they're watching the landscape of Mars move. This is augmented reality. This is the next way our kids are going to start learning in classrooms and outside of the classroom. So what are we looking at specifically here at the 50th Street location? So you can, most of you I'm sure are aware, this is the tower site, where it's located in relation to the field and track and the softball field. And then specifically what we're looking to do is, so the called out section in purple, that would be the additional space that we are requesting. We have a new customer who would like to install equipment on the ground in that area. There would not be an additional tower. They would install ground equipment. That equipment would then tie back to the tower. And then for a visual perspective, that's about the amount of land that we're talking about. So, and then finally, for points of contact. So just in general, we have a 24/7 availability by way of our landowners help desk. And then we have local representatives with Candace Clark, Tessa Linda. And then as we continue our conversation about this, I'll continue to trade emails with the city manager if the board approves this. And then if, again, assuming approval and we move to a construction phase, Brett will be our construction manager. He is boots on ground to make sure that things happen the way they're supposed to happen. And so what we're specifically, let me back up. So when we look at this, what we're talking about is an increase of about 340 square feet. And what we've proposed is, what was requested is to share in what it is we're collecting. And what we're proposing is to share 25% of what we collect from the company that's going to install in that space. So if, in closing, if there are any questions for me?
There is mention that you want to extend the term of the lease.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So when companies install, typically they're spending, in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000. They want to guarantee that they have an opportunity to get a return on that investment. So they, reach out to us and they're like, look, we're interested in going here, but we need to know that that tower is going to be there long term. So as a part of this, yes, ma'am, we would look to extend this, adding 20 years to the term, which would take it out to the end of September 30th, 2048. I don't think either one of us will, ma'am.
What's the total amount of revenue to the city based upon the proposed agreement?
We don't really have that number yet because we don't have, this approval. What I can give you as an example, we have national agreements with these customers, and on average, it's about $1,950 per month that we would collect, and then we take obviously our expenses out of that, and then but the 25% that we're proposing for the city would be 25% of the amount of that $1,950 in this example. And that would be on a monthly basis.
That's about $487.50 a month increase.
Would you explain the escalation of 15% every 5 years? So I understand that.
Sure. So right now, the current agreement has built into it. So every 5 years, the monthly rent that we pay goes up by 15%. And one of the things that I touched on is, so we have this existing agreement that has that built in, and that agreement is set to expire in 2028. At that time, in addition to the 15% that's built in, we would increase that by an additional 10%. And then finally, I think you'll see there that one of the things that we talked about is an expedite fee of $5,000. This applicant is, the term they use is speed to market. How quickly can we get operational? So as soon as we know that we can, we have the approval for this additional space and the other terms discussed here, I would work with Ms. Smith to set, a fair and a reasonable time period. As an example, if we receive notice within next week and we know that the city is going to have another meeting, say a month from now, what we would look to do is during that month to work with the city to come to an agreed document, and then the day after that board meeting where that document got approved, we would look to ask that the signed document be sent back. And then we could set that as the date for the expedite fee.
So since this wasn't in our packet and we're just now hearing this verbally, what you're really asking us to do is consider this proposal and maybe approve it after you bring it back to us. You're not asking for that approval now.
I understand that you'll definitely need to discuss it. I am presenting the information. If it's at all possible, say for example, now that you have the information, if it could be discussed among the council members and then voted on at the next meeting, for example. And if it's approved at the next meeting, we would go, for example, a month after that, where we would look at that as a date for the expedite.
But you would have more specifics to us by the next time we meet.
Which specifics would you like, ma'am?
Something in writing.
I have.
There is something in your packet that outlines it in the revised.
We didn't get it.
I would like to ask a question.
Sir?
I was a small businessman in the town, in our town, and we use business band radio. We could get out maybe 3 or 4 miles out, or then we went in and came onto a tower, and we would put a tower, and it was called a repeater or something.
Yes, sir.
This is basically the technology that you're talking about.
This is the next phase of that. So the technology you're talking about was probably 14 years ago. Repeaters were, and they're still used quite a bit when you're talking about radios, your broadcasters. But when you're talking about the carriers, that make your cell phones work, the mobile phones work, that's a different technology. The cellular, the distance of those is much shorter than repeaters, than the Omni antennas. Those are they're line of sight, but they're a longer distance. Where the frequencies used cause it to be a much shorter window, and they need more towers, more antennas. They are, just that line of sight is much shorter.
What would you give us an estimate on would be the possibility of this technology being around 20 years or whatever? You said you want a 20-year frame.
Well,
Are you saying we will give you you will give us 20 years out there, we will be more than happy to do this. But if your base goes over the hill and you have different technology, what will the city of Bethany do with that 400 and some square feet of property that we have out there? And we would not be receiving any remuneration from the rental of that.
well, let me start with, I don't think there's anybody that can make any promises, sir. But what I can say is that Crown Castle is betting on shared wireless infrastructure. That's our business. We're a publicly traded company, and we're betting that even if the specific technology, 4G or 5G changes, and we expect that will, it doesn't move away from the need for towers. Even as we move to small cell networks, those small cell networks they're much more costly, and they always tie back to a tower. That tower then transmits larger packets of data to other towers and then the end user. So we're betting that infrastructure is going to be there at least 20 years.
Well, we can go to Las Vegas and bet, but what I am asking, do you expect your technology to last for 20 years? If it does not last for 20 years, what is the alternative?
Again, I mean, the technology is going to change, sir.
Yes, I mean, if my
so,
computer changes every 2 years, and I have to learn how to run it.
So I'm not sure I follow your
Would you
question. then, sir.
consider a 10-year lease?
No, they can't. They've got too much money invested in this to consider a 10-year lease.
Extension.
Say what?
10-year extension,
Yeah,
because
10-year
they
extension.
currently have 10 additional years.
Right. I mean, as it stands today, the agreement does not set to expire until September of 2028.
So you want another 20 years
Correct.
after that,
Correct.
which brings
And
us out to 30 years.
Yes, sir. It would add 20 years. And as I understand Mayor Westmoreland, what he's saying is rather than 20, adding the additional 10, so going from 2028 to 2038 instead of 48. Is that correct, Mayor?
Correct.
Okay.
Please.
Please.
Monica Macesso, I'm the district manager for Crown Castle, and my territory is Tennessee, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. And I think to answer your question, sir, whether the technology changes or not, the need for the infrastructure will always be there. I feel that you're looking like maybe satellites or things like that. I think the technology is going to continue to grow. As you mentioned, your computer changes every time you buy a new one. You seem to be outdated. So the technology is always going to change, and it's always going to improve to meet the demand of the public. But the infrastructure and the tower will always be needed because we don't transmit any technology. We're simply a real estate company that provides a structure for Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint to locate on. So as their technology grows, they depend on us even more and more. So I don't foresee in 20 years that the need for the tower would ever go away.
I understand that, but what I am trying to do is protect the city of Bethany we're getting $400 a month or something like that. If it begins to drop off, what do we do?
Well, the base rent will remain. The base rent is not going to go along, as long as that tower is standing on your property and we hold rights to have the tower there, that base rent will continue to grow in the increments that Lance had referenced previously in the 15% increase every 5 years.
So I think the two parts is, so the $400 that you're talking about, that's additional. That's in addition to the base rent. So let's just say, for example, technology changed and the customer that's in the purple area, let's say they did go away. That land would then go back to use of Bethany, and of course the $400 would also go away. But the land then is at the use of Bethany. So then it's not ours to use, it's yours.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
That's basically what I was asking you.
I apologize.
If you move out of town, we don't want to lose the property, because we've seen so many properties in Bethany that somebody buys and they just sit on them for years. because they have the right to settle them?
I can't address that. I can tell you that Crown partners with the local jurisdictions. We work with state agencies, the federal government, from Hawaii to Maine and as far south into our territories as Puerto Rico. We look to partner. We're not going to abandon these. In a worst case, that all of these customers, their technology changed so much that satellites became so dependable that the tower was no longer needed, Crown would still be responsible under the agreement to return this site, to remove everything from there and return it to its pre-use condition, normal wear and tear accepted. So you would have the use of that land back without the blight of a tower or buildings.
Yes. Thank you very much for your explanation.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question.
I personally, I like the revised, not contract, but your revised amount that you brought to us with the percentage of it. If technology changes, it grows, we could actually do better than the flat rate amount. But I would feel more comfortable with a 10-year lease extension opposed to the 20.
Is that your call?
Would you be comfortable with that?
I don't have approval authority, but what I can do is if that's what the council can approve that tonight, I will take that back to my property committee and have them consider it, and I could have that. It won't be until next week, but I could have word on that next week if that's the council's decision here tonight.
Okay, then we'd like to put a caveat as a sidecar on this.
Understood.
For 10 years. Is this correct? Yes. Okay.
Do I have a motion?
I will
So
make.
moved.
So second. Please cast
What-
your votes.
We got to make sure the motion includes what we just talked about the 10-year. So it's specifically in our prior to his motion. I just want to make sure our minutes do reflect that, if that makes sense.
Berkeley, will our minutes reflect that?
Secretary's got that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Please cast your votes. Item 8 is discussion and possible action to reconsider resolution number 1512, previously approved on August 7th, 2018, approving annual reoccurring bills invoices for fiscal year 2019. I would like to personally say I apologize for this, but I am the one that asked for this to go back on the agenda, because I believe one of the things that this council has been attempting to do for quite some time is to bring more transparency and to bring more security to our financial oversight and security. And I believe that the approval of this eliminated some of that oversight. And I had to call in the council member and apologize for that. And so I asked for this to go back on the agenda because I would like to reconsider that, to take it back so council is watching and approving all reoccurring bills. Do I have a motion or any discussion or question?
I have a question.
So moved.
I just have a question. I remember when we discussed this previously, part of the issue was, since we could only pay it certain increments, that we were getting finance charges, revolving charges. And I don't remember what the impact, how much that cost. But that was part of the reason I was in favor of it, to reduce those costs where we had to pay interest, finance charges for being late on things. So I'm interested in, I don't know if you'd have those numbers handy, but.
I don't have the specific numbers, but I do know that we were being assessed $39, as late fees. And, we have worked to make sure that we're paying things so that we're not behind. And this resolution did help for that, because we were able to set up a weekly payment system. However, it doesn't affect me one way or the other. it affects the finance department, and if Berkeley says it doesn't bother him, then, we'll just go back to paying twice a month on our bills. But, we had all gotten into a kind of a routine of making sure that I had to approve bills every week, and by Wednesdays every week I was, making sure those were approved so that Berkeley could get those processed and Lisa could get those processed. But either way, it's probably less work for me if I can go back to every 2 weeks approving things, so.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, as
Fantastic,
long as there's
because
not.
I think it's, for me, it's all about security and financial oversight, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're elected, to keep an eye on what's going on. And I just feel like that one particular thing, and the reason why it came up in discussions that I was in, was because of the desire to move from 2 council meetings a month to 1 council meeting a month, and that was required to do so. And I don't believe that is required to do so.
It
if we
isn't
chose
required to do that, and
So-
I'm not sure where you heard that, but that's incorrect.
I like the transparency. I was just curious about that fiscal impact, how much it was going to cost us.
I
like
remember
to go
where I
through
heard
the
that, but I
payment
won't go into
Okay.
that. And so, do I have a motion for approval to take this back?
I made a motion.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Please cast your votes. Item 9 and 10, I would entertain a motion to table these items to the end of the council meeting tonight. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 11, citizens' opportunity to address the council on general topics related to city business or services. Your time is limited to 3 minutes. No action may be taken on matters under this item. Do we have anybody desiring to address the council tonight? If so, please step to the microphone, state your name and address, and we'll glad to hear from you. Item 12, the city attorney's report. Do we have anything tonight?
My name is Bethany Childs, and I'm sure as you all are aware, I'm not the city attorney. The city attorney can only be appointed by a unanimous vote of the city council. And of course, you do have a charter provision that requires the city attorney to live within the city of Bethany. I am, however, providing contract legal services to the city of Bethany. If you like, if the council would like for me to provide you an update with some of the projects that I'm working on, I'm happy to do that.
I would like that. I think it's helpful for us to know the direction we're going, and we're not getting our regular reports from the attorney when he gives his reports, so I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself, and I apologize, I'm kind of having to lean over the microphone, but my name is Bethany Childs, like you've heard me say a couple of times this evening. I basically have spent my entire career in public service. I've worked for the city of Norman and the city of Broken Arrow. Most recently, I served as the chief legal officer for the city of Broken Arrow for about 13 years. Actually, it was in excess of 13 years. I decided to resign that position because I had some health issues, and also I really needed to focus on my family. Prior to that time, I had done some medical malpractice defense, and before that I worked for the city of Broken Arrow as the city prosecutor, as assistant city attorney. I've argued 3 cases in Denver in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. I've tried lots and lots of cases, both civil and criminal. So what I can tell you about myself is I live in Tulsa. I don't have any plans to relocate to Bethany because I've got a daughter that's a sophomore in high school, and I've got a stepdaughter that is a junior in high school. And my husband is a physician and has a practice there. So I actually contacted David Davis when you had the assistant city attorney position open some months ago, I think it was in May, and offered my services because I knew that I was going to be completing my medical leave, and just thought that I could be maybe telecommute and provide some services because I'm pretty good with complex transactions. As you know, there were a series of changes, and Mr. Davis ended up retiring. So after the city manager came on board, she contacted me because she had my resume and asked if I'd be willing to perform some contract services. And so I would like to update you on some of the things that I have been working on. One of the things that I was asked to review was the TIF resolution. I did have some experience in TIFs and working with the Center for Economic Development Law, so I worked with them in order to handle that. Another very large project that I worked with Amanda on and her assistant was with the alcohol. What I can tell you is I did a comprehensive rehaul of those because of the state statute that goes into effect on October the 1st. We're sort of under the gun with regard to these particular changes, and many of the ordinances are outdated. So what we did is we kind of took a fresh look, and I rewrote all them, and also we formulated a process because the city of Bethany basically will be losing all of its regulatory authority with the exception of issuing certificates of compliance, and they have the ability to collect fees. Now, what we discussed today was we're going to refine those ordinances, send them out to staff, and then my goal is to provide them to the city manager and to provide them to the council in advance of the next meeting. I'd like to get them out to you early next week because they are pretty comprehensive, and so I would entertain any feedback that you all may have on these. This is going to be the rare occasion when it's going to be on the agenda where I would strongly suggest that you adopt the emergency clause because the state law actually will take effect one day. The good thing is apparently staff's had a number of phone calls about this, and so staff has done an excellent job in my estimation of sort of managing this in the interim. I have been asked to take a look at the personnel handbook or employment handbook. I've started the process of doing that. There's some opportunities to refine the code of ordinances, the employee handbook, and also the charter. That is going to take a little bit of time. One other thing that I've been working on that's going to really take a little bit more time is the Cox franchise agreement. That's up for renewal. It's actually sort of hanging in flux. I did contact a couple of jurisdictions because I wanted to look at their franchise agreements because that's that can be a source of revenue for the city, and I think that's very important. For example, some of your other franchises may have favored nations clauses in there, and that's something very important for the council to consider. And so if, Cox has made a presentation that wouldn't necessarily be favorable, although I'm sure it would be, sometimes you can tack on some additional things. One other issue that I would bring to your attention is in Oklahoma City there was litigation with regard to the right-of-way fees that had been charged, and it actually resulted in litigation that was transferred to Cleveland County. And, the city of Bethany has made a significant investment in terms of its right-of-way. And as you know, the utilities, they have the ability to utilize the rights-of-way and the easements to provide services to their customers. But oftentimes, if you're condemning or doing something like that, the city's made a pretty significant investment. So I apologize that wasn't on this agenda, but I really feel like it's worth a secondary look to ensure that the council has all the information available. Very briefly, some of the other smaller projects I've been working on is I've been reviewing the agendas. I made some notes. I've got quite a few notes actually of things, recommendations might refine some of your processes. Provided guidance on executive session language. I've worked with staff on a technology fee for municipal court, which we're able to. We'll have that ready. I also worked with the city engineer earlier today on at-risk construction management for the ADA repairs. I was asked by staff to take a look at the home inspection ordinance. That's something that I'm going to take a little bit of time to look at just because of the nationwide impact. I just want to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences with that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do some work for you. I have to tell you, I absolutely love municipal law. It's my passion. My kids are so grateful that I'm doing this because I don't bore them with how they're building a street. Also, I would note David Davis. I'm so appreciative to him. He sometimes you all don't get to hear it, but he's very, very well respected in the municipal law community. I mean, there are very few of us that are true blue municipal practitioners, and he has been incredibly responsive and helpful to me. And I've talked to him a number of times, and so in any event, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this, and hopefully you found what I have to say helpful.
Thank you. Item 13 is City Manager's Report.
I just have to say that it has been very helpful having Beth Ann work with us. I've only been here 3 months now, and really the first 2 months, we were at a standstill because we did not have a city attorney. And so it's been very helpful for Beth Ann to step in because we have issues that come to us every day and, require attorneys' opinions for that. And so Beth Ann has worked very closely with a lot of us on staff for that. And I'd just like to open it up for any questions that anyone would have for anything that I've been doing.
If I might ask a question, it's not what you've been doing. Is there any way that we can get the Planning and Zoning Board back into operation so that the city can carry on business?
Well, it's not me who's holding this up, sir. I am sorry that.
Could you tell me who it is? I got a
There
get
are
man.
there are state regulations for that, and we've been working with IBTS. Doug Moore is he works with IBTS, but he's part of the State Planning Commission, and it's kind of his forte to know about Board of Adjustments and Planning and Zoning committees. And so we've actually spoken with him. We've worked a little bit with Beth Ann and some other attorneys, and there are designated terms of service for each member of those boards. And when those terms of service are over, they must be reappointed. And that is all that we're waiting on is for the full reappointments. Now, once we do get a quorum, we'll be able to move forward on it. And we do have several properties that are waiting, for that to happen. And so we're very anxious to get that underway, I assure you. But we're at the mercy of the council to get the prospective applicants to us so that that can be approved by the council and the appointments made so that we can start that again. And Amanda works with this more than I do. Amanda, are we moving in that direction? Could you tell us what number we are?
I believe, we just looked at this yesterday, I believe we are at 4 members of planning and zoning that are within their term limits. We need 5 in order to have a quorum. At this point, we're looking at, with filing deadlines and such, probably at least the second meeting in October or the first meeting in November before we can hear any of the cases that we have. And we have, I believe right now, 3 or 4 that are waiting to be heard.
Well, I don't want to appear snippy or anything, but we had a faux pas on the planning, on the amendment or the agenda, and if that had been written correctly, we would have had 2 more and would have had 7, and then you could have played games with the state. But the state law says that you're on a board until you are removed.
Mr. Shirey, I'll take responsibility for not having
No,
those on there properly. I would offer up then, if we need to move forward that quickly, we call a special meeting for Thursday night and we appoint the 2 Ward 3s, planning and zoning members, and then we can move forward.
Let's do it.
Or we
I'm tired of people sitting around calling me saying we need to get something done.
We will call that special meeting.
It's almost too late to do that, though, isn't it? We've missed
has
that.
to be 48 hours.
Unless we have a
Can do
9
it.
o'clock meeting.
I can show up.
Does
long as it's a
anyone
quick
else
meeting.
have someone to appoint? I mean, we've put out a request, but we don't have a response.
We've done this before, and maybe Beth Ann Childs could help us in this, but we could actually continue this meeting for Thursday night and amend this agenda? No? Okay. Friday morning then.
I know.
Friday lunchtime. Friday evening.
I think it could be any time that you designate.
I can make it.
Will we have appointments beyond what these 2, or is this?
Just need a
The 2
quorum, don't we?
Ward 3.
You
It looks
have
If
like
we
I
have the
got
2
two.
that were on tonight, we would have a quorum,
Mhm.
if we could get
Can everybody
all
show up
P&Z
Friday
members
morning?
to the meeting.
This Friday.
21st.
Yeah, the 21st.
I don't believe
No.
so, as long as you can't call somebody with it.
Well, I'll call McDonald's and reserve a table down there so we can have a
There we
breakfast.
go.
Okay, guys.
Coffee's on
You're
you,
on.
right?
Coffee, I'll buy.
Awesome. I'm all for calling a special meeting for Friday morning and getting this resolved so that they have a quorum.
What time?
Who can be there? I can be there. I can.
What time?
10 o'clock.
Anytime. I'm retired.
8 a.m.
I'm retired.
Okay. That it is. Okay.
It'll have to be in the morning. It'll have to be in the morning by 8 a.m. So maybe we should say
Let's do it 9
8:30.
a.m.
Yeah, 9.
Is that better, Mr.
Yeah.
Shirey? Okay, 9 a.m. Okay, is that settled? Okay. Item 14, council members' announcements, comments, and proposals. Let's start down at Mr. Palmer.
I have nothing tonight.
Dr. Harris?
I'd have nothing.
Mr. Todd?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got this letter in the mail today from the city of Bethany describing this 5K run coming up. It did a good job of saying the date and the time of day. It said it's going to be on 23rd Street.
Sure.
Didn't say where on 23rd Street. Furthermore, it doesn't say what the route is. It gives us a map, but you don't know where up parts on 23rd Street is a starting point, or where is the staging point, where are you supposed to park. And so I'm a little confused because I don't know if I'm going this way on the map or that way on the map.
I think that starts in DeVille Shopping Center.
Well, it doesn't say that.
We did receive a flyer earlier that had all of that information. It did not have the map.
So we might want to recheck our mailings before they go out.
Are you worried
Thank
about
you.
being there on time?
The mailing.
No, I'm trying to figure out where to go.
The mailing that went out was for purposes of the homeowners that would be affected, more so than encouraging anyone to run the race per se. So it was what street closures there would be, what times there would be, so the neighborhoods would know what to expect. We wanted to give them plenty of time to call up here, ask questions, give us concerns before the date, so that there was no surprise on the day of the actual race. And that was the intent of that letter that went out.
That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
We expect you to be there with your tennis shoes on. Mr. Herron? Mr. McCutcheon? Mr. Shirey?
I have addressed all my items on the agenda.
Mr. Knapp?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any new business? With no new business, remember items 9 and 10 were moved to the end of this evening's council meeting agenda. So with that, council meeting is adjourned until October 2nd, 2018. With that, I call to order the Bethany Public Works Authority. Item 1 is the consent docket A through C. Do I have a motion or any questions?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, declare us adjourned.
I do.
You do?
Yes. Each month as I look at the $32,000 we're paying, for example, for landfill, I once again wish we could explore curbside recycling. I mean, $32,000 a month for landfill is a lot of money. And I recognize the fact that curbside recycling does not make money, but it would be less that we would be putting in landfill.
I would be interested in researching that and seeing the difference and looking into if that is compared to that amount you just gave, if recycling would be a lesser expense. Anybody else have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 2nd, 2018. I call to order the Bethany Hospital Trust. Item 1 is consent docket A through C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 2nd, 2018. I call to order the Bethany Development Authority. Item 1, consent docket A through C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item 2 is new business. Do we have any new business? With no new business, I declare us adjourned until October 2nd, 2018. And that brings us to items 9 and 10. Proposed executive session, consideration and possible action, and I will read these two together. Can I read these two together? Okay. I reconvene the city council meeting. Moving to items 9 and 10. May I read the two together and get one motion, or do I need to do them separately? Okay. Item 9 is consideration and possible action to enter into executive session for confidentiality communication with legal counsel regarding an investigation into a complaint filed by the city manager against a member of the city council, and B, a complaint filed an employee against the city manager, with the advice of legal counsel that public disclosure would seriously impair the ability of the city council to conduct an investigation into the complaints in the public interest as authorized by 25 OS Section 307B4. Item 10 is executive session consideration and possible action on items discussed in executive session, including possible action A, to designate one or more members of the city council to initiate and oversee an independent investigation into the complaints, with those designees to report back to the city council as deemed appropriate. B, to place the city manager on routine paid administrative leave during the investigation. C, to designate an acting city manager while the city manager is on routine administrative leave as authorized by Article 3, Section 3.2 of the city charter, and D, to authorize the acting city manager to continue to utilize the services of Attorney Beth Ann Childs to fulfill the functions of the current vacated office of city attorney. Before I call for a motion, I would like to say that as a council, we are elected to look at the best interests of the city as a whole, and when these things are needed to be looked into, like these executive sessions, I believe we go into these things with an attitude that is neutral, and we focus solely on the best interest of the city. And with that, I ask, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. I would like council and Ms. Childs and Matt Love to join me in executive session. Okay, we are out of executive session. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize Attorney Thomas LeBlanc to conduct an investigation of a complaint filed by the city manager against a member of the city council.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
And the second item, I move that we authorize Attorney Thomas LeBlanc to conduct an investigation of a complaint filed by an employee against the city manager.
Please cast your votes.
On the third issue, I move that we appoint the vice mayor as the council liaison for the investigations.
Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes.
The fourth item, I move that we place the city manager on routine administrative leave during the pendency of these investigations.
Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes.
The fifth item, I move we appoint Chief Phil Cole as acting city manager.
Do I have a second? Second. Please cast your votes.
We find that the executive session was necessary to consider these matters in executive session on the advice of counsel, and it was in the public interest. Council is not making a motion on the final item because we already have a contract with Beth Ann Childs for legal services to the city of Bethany.
And with that tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.